I didn't return to that house to start a war. I only came for the remaining documents the investigator needed, intending to slip in and out without awakening old wounds. But the universe has a strange sense of timing, and all it took was one sentence, one quiet, casual sentence to redirect everything inside me, because as I stepped into the hallway, I heard my father say, as if announcing weather, that my savings had been given to someone who will use them better. A phrase delivered with such cold confidence that I stood frozen, my fingers still wrapped around the strap of my bag, the world tightening in on itself. My mother nodded in calm agreement, stirring sugar into her tea as though she hadn't just carved my future open. And I felt the kind of stillness that isn't shock but clarity, the kind that settles deep into your bones when betrayal stops being surprising and becomes expected. And I walked into the room slowly, deliberately, watching their faces shift only slightly, annoyance, not guilt, as if I was interrupting an important discussion about the weather. "You're early," my mother muttered, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of being treated like the inconvenience in a life built from my sacrifices. But instead I asked the question they didn't to want spoken aloud, better than me? And in that moment something like amusement flickered in my father's eyes, the subtle cruelty of a man who believed thoroughly in his own righteousness. And he leaned back, entirely unbothered, saying the same word he used every time he took something from me. My fund, my belongings, my trust. It's done. A word that landed like a gavel, final and dismissive. But this time something in me had hardened in the months leading here, because I had already followed the trail of late-night whispers, unusual withdrawals, digitally erased logs, and a strangely familiar name appearing in transaction notes. Liam, a boy from 2 streets away, someone they claimed to be helping, someone who had slowly become a fixture in the house while I was treated like a visitor in the home I grew. UPN. I had discovered everything, the accounts they siphoned from, the scholarship money they redirected, the gifts from relatives that never reached me, the email on my father's laptop that spelled it out plainly. Transfer complete. Use this to get him started. She adjust eventually, as if I were an obstacle that needed to adjust to being erased. And instead of confronting them in the moment, instead of shouting or crying or demanding something they would never give, I turned to precision, to strategy, to the power of quiet children who grow up watching and recording every detail others assume they'll miss. And I gathered every screenshot, every bank log, every receipt, months of evidence carefully organized before taking it all to a legal advisor who didn't to blink once while explaining how parents like mine counted on silence. And he helped me build a case brick by brick until I knew exactly when to strike. Now, standing in the living room with my folder held like a weapon crafted from truth, I watched my parents' confidence shift from irritation to unease as I placed the documents on the table, each page a reflection of their intentions, each number cutting deeper than any accusation. And when my father asked, with a mocking smirk, if I thought the law would take my side, I simply told him the hearing date, how the investigation had already begun, how the authorities had copies of everything, how silence wasn't compliance, it was preparation. And something cracked in my mother's expression then, a small fracture along the mask she'd worn for years, while my father clenched his jaw as though trying to hold on to authority, slipping like sand through his fingers. They tried to call me ungrateful, overly dramatic, vindictive, and I let them speak because none of it mattered, not after I had spoken to Liam myself. Not after he opened the door with wide, confused eyes when I visited and told me he had no idea the money wasn't Tith's to give, that he was told I didn't care, that I wasn't interested in my own education or future, that my parents had convinced him I was wasting resources they were nobly reallocating, and the guilt on his face was genuine when he returned whatever portion he still had, promising he never meant to take anything from me. And I believed him because the real thieves weren't children. They were the people who raised me. The people standing in front of me now, speechless and suddenly small. And just when the silence in the room grew thick enough to choke on, there was a soft knock on the open doorway, and all three of us turned to see Liam himself standing there with an envelope in his trembling hands, explaining he had come to return the last of what he could, and that he was sorry, truly sorry, because he'd been told a story in which I was unmotivated, irresponsible, disposable, a narrative crafted by the very people who should have defended me. And watching their faces darken with shame, confusion, and something dangerously close to fear felt like the closest thing to justice I had ever known. After he left, the room sagged under the weight of truth, and I told my parents calmly, almost gently, that they should get a lawyer, a real one, because the case wouldn't disappear just because they refused to believe I had teeth. And then I picked up my folder, turned my back on the house that taught me betrayal before love, and walked out into the evening air, breathing deeper than I had in years, the cold settling not painfully, but clearly a reminder that quiet wars, fought with evidence, patience, and timing, don't just end, they transform the one who survived them.